Stop talking. Schopenhauer's silent strategy for success. Have you ever noticed how much noise surrounds us every day? Not just the literal noise of the world, cars honking, phones buzzing, endless chatter, but the noise of our own minds, of conversations that seem to go nowhere, of opinions thrown around like confetti, and of endless debates that leave us feeling empty. We talk, we argue, we explain, and we justify. But what if I told you that real power, real success, lies not in speaking, but in silence? What if the key to mastering life is learning when not to talk? Arthur Schopenhauer, one of history's most enigmatic and provocative philosophers, believed that silence was far more potent than speech. He wasn't just talking about the absence of words, he was talking about a strategy, a way of navigating the world that puts quiet wisdom over loud performance, stillness over chaos, and observation over assertion. Schopenhauer's silent strategy is not about retreating or avoiding communication, it's about mastering the art of restraint, of listening, of seeing beyond the surface. And if you master this strategy, you'll find that silence doesn't make you weaker, it makes you untouchable. Why do we talk so much? Have you ever asked yourself that? Why do we feel the need to fill every empty space with words? Often it's because we think talking gives us power. We believe that if we explain ourselves enough, if we argue well enough, if we sound smart enough, we'll win respect, admiration, or control. But the truth is, the more we talk, the more vulnerable we become. Words expose us. They give people insight into our thoughts, our emotions, and even our weaknesses. Every word you say is a piece of yourself you're giving away, a fragment of your inner world that can be used against you. Schopenhauer understood this. He believed that silence is a fortress. When you hold your tongue, you protect your thoughts. You become unpredictable, enigmatic, a mystery to those around you. Think about the people you admire most, the ones who seem calm, collected, and wise. Are they the ones constantly talking, or the ones who speak rarely but with purpose? Silence commands attention because it signals strength. It shows that you don't need to prove yourself with words. You're grounded enough to let your actions, your presence, and your insight do the talking for you. But silence isn't just about power in social situations, it's also a tool for self-mastery. How often do we talk simply to avoid discomfort? When we're nervous, we ramble. When we're unsure, we over-explain. When we're insecure, we try to justify ourselves. All of this talking is a way to avoid facing the deeper truth that we're uncomfortable with silence, not just with others, but with ourselves. Schopenhauer would argue that this discomfort is precisely why silence is so important. When you cultivate silence, you're forced to confront yourself. You start to hear the thoughts beneath the noise, the truths you've been avoiding, the insights that only come when the world gets quiet. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly listened, not just to someone else, but to yourself? When was the last time you sat in silence and let your mind settle, without reaching for your phone, turning on music, or filling the space with conversation? Most of us are terrified of this kind of stillness because it reveals what we've been suppressing. But that's exactly why it's so powerful. Silence strips away the distractions and brings us face to face with reality. And in that reality, we find clarity, strength, and focus.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Schopenhauer also believed that silence gives us an edge in understanding others. When you stop talking, you start observing. You notice the subtleties in people's behavior, their tone, their body language, the things they're not saying. You gain a deeper understanding of their intentions, their fears, and their motivations. And this understanding is power, because when you truly understand someone, you can navigate any situation with precision. You're no longer reacting to their words, you're responding to their essence. Think about this: how many conflicts could you have avoided if you had just stayed silent? How many arguments escalated because you felt the need to have the last word? How many opportunities did you miss because you were too busy talking to notice what was happening around you? Silence is not passive, it's active. It's a choice to hold back, to observe, to think before you speak. And that choice can change everything. So here's the challenge: what would happen if you stopped talking, not forever, but just long enough to notice the power of silence? What would you learn about yourself, about others, about the world, if you embraced stillness instead of filling the air with words? And most importantly, how much stronger, clearer, and more focused would you become if you mastered Schopenhauer's silent strategy? The hidden power of restraint, why less is more restraint, is one of the most underestimated forms of power. In a world that rewards noise, speed, and constant action, holding back feels counterintuitive. It feels like doing nothing, like giving up your voice. But restraint isn't about passivity, it's about control. It's about choosing when to act and when to stay still, when to speak and when to remain silent. It's about understanding that less is often far more powerful than more. Arthur Schopenhauer saw restraint as a form of mastery. He believed that those who could discipline their impulses, particularly the impulse to speak, would rise above the chaos and noise of the world. And he was right. Restraint isn't just a tactic for success, it's a mindset, a way of moving through life with purpose and precision. It's about knowing that every word, every action, every decision carries weight, and that by doing less, you can actually achieve more. Think about it. How often do we speak simply to fill the silence? How often do we take action simply because we feel we should be doing something? Most of the time, these impulses come from fear of being forgotten, fear of losing opportunities, fear of being misunderstood. But when we act or speak from fear, we scatter our energy. We dilute our intentions. Restraint, on the other hand, focuses that energy. It allows us to move with clarity and precision, to speak only when our words matter, to act only when the timing is right. Imagine this: you're in a meeting, a social gathering, or even a conversation with a close friend. Most people in these situations feel an almost compulsive need to contribute. They want to be heard, to prove their value, to leave an impression. But now picture someone who listens deeply, who observes the dynamics of the room, who speaks only when they have something meaningful to say. That person doesn't fade into the background, they stand out. Their words carry weight because they're rare, intentional, and free from the clutter of noise. Restraint is also about knowing your worth. When you speak too much, when you give away too much of yourself, you devalue your presence. You make yourself too accessible, too predictable, too easy to understand. But when you practice restraint, you create a sense of mystery. You become someone people want to listen to because they know you don't speak lightly. Your silence becomes a signal of confidence, of inner strength, of self-respect. Schopenhauer understood that restraint wasn't just a social skill, it was a way to protect your energy and focus. By holding back, by choosing not to react to every provocation or temptation, you conserve your strength for the things that truly matter. And in doing so, you gain an edge over those who exhaust themselves chasing every fleeting opportunity or argument. Here's another way to think about it: life is like a chess game. Every move you make has consequences. If you play impulsively, if you rush to make a move just to fill the silence, you leave yourself vulnerable. But if you wait, if you observe the board, if you resist the urge to act prematurely, you gain a strategic advantage. Restraint is about seeing the bigger picture. It's about playing the long game, even when it's tempting to make a quick move. But restraint isn't easy. It requires patience, discipline, and a willingness to sit with discomfort. It requires you to resist the urge to explain yourself, to defend yourself, to prove yourself, and that can feel incredibly vulnerable. Silence, after all, feels like surrender. But Schopenhauer believed the opposite. Silence is strength. It's a refusal to give away your power. It's a statement that you don't need to justify yourself to anyone. Ask yourself this: how many times have you spoken out of impatience, only to regret it later? How many opportunities have you missed because you acted too quickly without thinking things through? And how much energy could you save if you practiced restraint, if you learned to sit still, to wait, to speak only when the time was right? Restraint is not about doing less for the sake of doing less. It's about doing less so that what you do truly matters. It's about speaking less so that what you say carries weight. It's about acting less so that your actions create lasting impact. So the next time you feel the urge to talk, to act, to fill the space, pause. Ask yourself, is this necessary? Is this meaningful? Is this the right moment? And if the answer is no, choose silence. Choose stillness. Choose restraint. Silence as power. Mastering the unspoken silence is often misunderstood. We associate it with weakness, awkwardness, or even irrelevance. Yet, silence, when wielded with intention, can be one of the most powerful forces in human interaction. It holds a gravity that words can never achieve. Silence doesn't just fill the space, it reshapes it, demands attention, and shifts the dynamics of any situation. To master silence is to master the art of influence, control, and understanding. Think of silence not as the absence of sound, but as a presence in its own right. When you're silent, you create a void, and in that void, others reveal themselves. People rush to fill silence with their thoughts, their emotions, their insecurities. Their words often betray what they might try to conceal. Silence allows you to see through the masks people wear, to understand their true intentions without being distracted by the noise of their performance. Schopenhauer understood this. Silence, when used wisely, is not passive. It's active. It's a tool for gathering information, for seeing clearly, and for maintaining control. Consider a heated argument. Most people in such a moment will raise their voices, interrupt, and try to dominate the conversation. But what happens when you remain silent? When you refuse to react? When you let the other person run out of breath? And that silence becomes deafening. It forces the other person to confront their own words, their own emotions. It creates a space for reflection, a moment of disarmament. Silence doesn't escalate conflict, it dissolves it. And when you finally choose to speak, your words will carry far more weight because they emerge from a place of deliberate thought, not reactive emotion. But silence isn't just a tool for managing others, it's also a way to master yourself. In a world that constantly demands your attention, silence is an act of rebellion. It's a refusal to let the noise of the world dictate your thoughts and actions. It's a way of reclaiming your mind, of creating a sanctuary where you can think deeply and clearly. When you practice silence, you create the mental space to reflect on your life, your goals, your values. You begin to hear the voice beneath the noise, the voice of your true self. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you truly experienced silence? Not just the absence of sound, but the kind of silence that comes from disconnecting from distractions, from letting go of the need to explain yourself, from simply being present with your thoughts. Most of us are terrified of this kind of silence because it forces us to confront truths we'd rather avoid. But that confrontation is where growth begins. Silence is the mirror that reflects who you really are without the filters of noise and performance. Schopenhauer believed that silence was a form of strength, because it allowed you to resist the pull of the superficial. To remain silent in the face of provocation requires discipline. To stay silent when everyone else is speaking requires confidence. To embrace silence when the world demands noise requires courage. Silence, in this sense, is not weakness, it's resistance. It's a refusal to be swept away by the currents of chaos. But silence isn't just a defensive strategy, it's also a creative force. In silence, ideas are born. In silence, solutions emerge. Think of the greatest thinkers, artists, and philosophers throughout history. Their breakthroughs didn't come in moments of noise or distraction, they came in moments of solitude and reflection. Silence is the space where genius flourishes. It's where you reconnect with your intuition, where you see patterns others miss, where you find clarity in the midst of complexity. Here's a question to consider: what could you discover about yourself if you embraced silence? What truths are waiting for you in the stillness? And how much more powerful could you become if you mastered the unspoken, if you learned to use silence as a tool for understanding, for influence, and for self-mastery? Silence is not the absence of power, it's the essence of it. It's the calm before the storm, the pause that makes the music meaningful, the space where transformation begins. So, the next time you feel the urge to speak, ask yourself, is silence the stronger choice? Is silence where your power lies? Because often the greatest strength is not in what you say, but in what you choose to leave unsaid. Living the silent strategy, transforming your world through stillness. Silence, when fully understood and embraced, is not just a tactic, it is a way of life. To live with silence as your strategy is to move through the world with a heightened sense of awareness, control, and purpose. It's a mindset that values observation over reaction, reflection over impulsivity, and understanding over dominance. Living this way doesn't mean withdrawing from the world or refusing to engage, it means engaging with precision, with clarity, and only when it truly matters. Think about how much of your daily energy is spent on unnecessary noise, not just spoken words, but mental chatter, distractions, and reactive behaviors. When we allow ourselves to get swept up in this noise, we lose sight of what is essential. We become reactive, constantly responding to the world rather than shaping our own path through it. The silent strategy flips this dynamic. By embracing stillness, you regain control over your inner and outer worlds. You stop reacting to everything around you and start acting with intention. Schopenhauer's philosophy of silence is not about isolation, it's about mastery. It's about mastering your impulses, your emotions, and your need for validation. When you live the silent strategy, you realize that you don't need to constantly explain yourself to others. You don't need to prove your worth with words or actions that seek approval. Silence is self-sufficiency. It's a declaration that your value isn't determined by how much you say or do, but by the depth of your presence and the strength of your character. Living this way also transforms how you perceive time. When you practice silence, you slow down. You start to notice details that others overlook. You begin to see the patterns beneath the surface, the unspoken dynamics in relationships, the subtle shifts in opportunities. Silence allows you to step back, to see the bigger picture, and to act when the time is right. It teaches you patience, not the kind of patience that waits passively, but the kind that knows how to bide its time, to strike with precision when the moment demands it. Here's a question worth pondering: how would your life change if you adopted silence as your default? If, instead of rushing to fill every moment with action or speech, you chose to pause, to observe, to reflect? How much of your energy could you reclaim? How much wiser would your decisions become? And how much more powerful would your presence feel to those around you? Living the silent strategy is not easy. It requires discipline, courage, and a willingness to confront yourself in ways most people avoid. But if you can master it, silence will transform your life. It will give you clarity in chaos, strength in stillness, and power in restraint. And in a world that never stops talking, your silence will speak louder than words ever could.